In America's capital city, a place where power is negotiated in every corridor, a very different kind of battle was unfolding. A battle not between politicians, but between a homeowner and a guest who refused to leave. This is the story of a booking gone wrong, a 32-day stay that spiraled into a months-long legal war, a case that sent shockwaves through Airbnb hosts across the nation and forced lawmakers to confront just how unprepared we are for the new world of short-term rentals. Our story begins in early 2025 when Roshanne Douglas, a Washington, D.C. homeowner, listed her fully furnished home on Airbnb. It was clean, modern, impeccably kept, a quiet sanctuary near the heart of the city. She'd hosted before. Everything seemed routine. When a woman named Khadija Romero requested a 32-day stay, Roshanne saw no reason to hesitate. Romero claimed she needed temporary housing after a fire damaged her own property. Sympathetic and trusting, Roshanne opened her doors. What she didn't know was that letting her in would mean fighting for months to get her out. February 2025. Romero moves in. She pays for her 32 days up front, standard Airbnb protocol. And for a while, everything appears normal. But as the end of March approaches, red flags start to appear. Romero hints at extending her stay, but never officially books more dates. She mentions her home repairs taking longer. Nothing alarming? Not yet. Then March 29th arrives, checkout day, and Romero simply doesn't leave. When Roshanne returns to inspect her property, she finds Romero still inside, belongings everywhere. And when asked to leave, Romero refuses. This is the moment the real story begins. Because in Washington, D.C., there's a legal threshold that few Airbnb hosts know about. 30 days of occupancy can grant tenant protections. Once someone remains in a residence for more than 30 days, even without a lease, they can argue tenant status. That means the homeowner can't just remove them. They have to go through the courts. As weeks pass, Roshanne watches a nightmare unfold in slow motion. Romero remains in the home. Utilities spike. Neighbors report unusual activity. And, most importantly, Romero stops paying. By July, the guest who came for a 32-day stay is now living rent-free. Desperate, Douglas tries to regain control. She boards up windows. She changes locks. But then, astonishingly, Romero returns with her daughter and breaks back in. Once someone claims tenant protection, changing locks is illegal, even if it's the homeowner's property. This is where the law feels upside down for many people. Digging into Romero's background reveals a pattern. Court records show 2 prior evictions in the district, including one involving over $30,000 in unpaid rent. To some observers, this isn't an accident. It looks like a system being exploited. I'm not freeloading. I've paid months of rent. I have rights. But according to filings, payments ceased months earlier. Roshanne files for eviction in D.C. Superior Court. The case enters the landlord and tenant branch, a court designed to handle disputes quickly. But this becomes anything but quick. Romero argues she is a legal tenant. Douglas argues she only overstayed after a short-term rental. The judge weighs both sides, and month after month, Douglas waits. In a move known as cash for keys, Douglas offers Romero $2,500 to leave peacefully. Romero signs the agreement, but does not move out. A signed contract. Ignored. A homeowner, powerless in her own home. Airbnb states the booking ended in March and the company has no authority once a guest overstays. This isn't an Airbnb dispute anymore, it's a housing law dispute. And it's up to the courts to decide. By late 2025, the standoff between homeowner Roshan Douglas and occupant Khadija Romero had become more than a private dispute. The case now lived inside the chambers of the D.C. Superior Court, its outcome watched not only by neighbors, but by millions across the country. Inside courtroom 118, the air was thick with tension. On one side, Douglas carrying months of frustration, legal fees and a mortgage on a home she could not enter. On the other, Romero, presenting herself not as a squatter but as a protected tenant under D.C. law. This wasn't a simple eviction hearing. It was a debate about what it means to be a tenant in the age of Airbnb. Romero's attorney argued a crucial point. She had occupied the property for over 30 days, even if originally booked through Airbnb. Under D.C. statutes, this meant she met the 30-day tenant rule. D.C. law prioritizes stability for residents. Once someone stays 30 days, the system treats them like a tenant, even if there's no lease, even if the initial stay was short-term. But Douglas's team countered. Romero was never approved for tenancy. She was a guest who simply refused to leave. She overstayed an Airbnb booking. She has no lease. She stopped paying. She is not a tenant. She is unlawfully occupying the home. Two narratives, two legal realities. Only one could win. The homeowner's side presented a timeline. The signed cash for keys agreement, which Romero accepted but never followed. Screenshots showing no rent payments after July. Police reports filed when Romero allegedly broke back into the unit after lock changes, and witness statements from neighbors describing constant foot traffic. People kept coming in and out. It looked like a busy apartment, not someone temporarily displaced. We never saw any signs of her preparing to leave. But Romero fought back. She insisted she was not a squatter. She was a renter caught in a legal misunderstanding. I paid months of rent. I only stayed because I had nowhere else to go. She kept changing the locks. She kept harassing me. I didn't break in. I was coming back to my home. Her claims painted a different world, one where she wasn't manipulating the system but trapped in it. Even people who owe rent still have rights. The court doesn't determine morality, it determines legality. The judge listened for hours, testimony, cross-examination, every line of paperwork. But judges in the landlord and tenant branch rarely speak emotionally. They speak in rulings. The judge determined that Romero did not hold legal tenant status. Her occupancy stemmed from a lapsed Airbnb booking, not a residential lease. She had no right to remain. And in late 2025, the court authorized her removal. It was the decision Douglas had been waiting months to hear. But while the legal ruling was decisive, public opinion was anything but. As news broke across local outlets and major blogs, the country erupted into debate. Some viewers sided with Douglas, outraged that a homeowner could lose control of her own property for months. Others sided with Romero, calling the laws confusing, poorly written, or protective of the vulnerable. This case had grown bigger than two women. It became a referendum on property rights, tenants' rights, and a system struggling to adapt to modern housing realities. While the world debated, Douglas and Romero continued their lives behind closed doors. Douglas, exhausted, still faced utility bills, mortgage payments, and legal fees. Romero faced eviction and the weight of national scrutiny. 2 women, 2 hardships, one conflict that neither of them would ever forget. This case exposed how unclear short-term rental laws are. Airbnb wasn't designed to create long-term tenants, but in many cities the law hasn't caught up. Tenant rights, due process, 30-day rule, legal eviction, host rights, property control, contract limits, lockout restrictions. Most hosts didn't know the 30-day rule existed. Most renters didn't know overstaying could create tenancy. And the courts became the battleground for both. Airbnb, caught in the crossfire, issued brief statements clarifying the stay had ended in March. And they held no authority after that. But as public backlash grew, the pressure mounted. Council members in D.C. began quietly reviewing existing housing statutes. Some states across the U.S. started drafting clearer rules to prevent similar disputes. Because when one case exposes a flaw in the system, lawmakers take notice. After the ruling, Douglas prepared once again to secure her home. Eviction day loomed, the day a months-long nightmare might finally end. Romero was given notice. Time was running out. But one question remained. Would she go peacefully? By the time the case reached its 8th month, it wasn't just a D.C. housing dispute anymore. It had become a symbol, a rallying cry, a talking point, a political debate, a TikTok trend, a cable news argument. You name it, this case wore that hat at least once. Clips of the homeowner crying in frustration circulated online. Commenters were outraged, confused, or in disbelief. Some asked, how can someone book an Airbnb and then legally stay forever? Others asked the much bigger question. If this can happen to her, can this happen to me? The story now had national legs, and it was running fast. Noticing the uproar, D.C. officials had to respond, at least verbally. Housing authorities issued statements clarifying the law. A guest who stays more than 30 days with no lease may still qualify as a tenant under D.C. statute. Landlords, including accidental landlords like Airbnb hosts, must follow the full eviction process. A sheriff may not forcibly remove someone without a court order. It was all true. But none of it helped the homeowner, now 8 months deep into misery. She needed action. What she got was bureaucracy. Local reporters attempted to contact the woman living inside the Airbnb, hoping to hear her side of the story. She refused all interviews, issued no public statement, and declined to answer questions from the press. But neighbors told reporters they'd seen Amazon packages delivered constantly and food delivery arriving several times a week. One neighbor told a journalist. The judge scheduled another hearing, then another, then another. For the homeowner, the delays felt like torture. For the squatter, they were a shield, a way to extend her stay without paying a dime. As time passed, the homeowner's financial situation worsened. Court documents later showed she had spent thousands on lawyer fees. She missed months of rental income. She still had to pay the mortgage, utilities, and property taxes on a home she couldn't enter. She had to continue providing upkeep for a property she couldn't control. What started as an Airbnb business venture had now become a financial sinkhole. The cost of fighting the case was rising every single month. In early 2024, something unexpected finally happened. A breakthrough. After reviewing the filings, the judge determined there was enough evidence to classify the occupant as a holdover tenant, someone who stayed after their legal right ended, not a lawful tenant with a binding lease. This meant the owner could move forward toward eviction. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but it was movement. After multiple hearings and months of legal tug-of-war, the court finally issued what the homeowner had been praying for. A writ of restitution, a legal order allowing the sheriff to remove the occupant. This was the moment she had been waiting for, but even then she had to wait for the sheriff's office to schedule the lockout, a process that could take weeks. Still, for the first time in nearly a year, she felt hope. Real hope. On a cold morning with paperwork in hand, the sheriff arrived at the property. Neighbors watched from their windows. Court documents indicate the occupant gathered her belongings with little resistance. She walked out calmly, refusing to speak with anyone, and disappeared down the street. Just like that, after nearly a year of chaos, the nightmare ended. But the aftermath was just beginning. When the homeowner finally entered her property, she found furniture missing, burn marks on floors, broken kitchen equipment, trash bags piled from corner to corner, bathroom mold, clothing stuffed into vents, damage hidden behind furniture. She documented everything for future legal and insurance claims. What had once been a stylish Airbnb was now unrecognizable. Reporters described the photos as devastating. Could she pursue damages? Technically, yes. But suing someone who paid no rent, paid no legal fees, vanished quietly, meant the homeowner would likely never see a penny. Instead, she absorbed the loss, restored the home, and slowly tried rebuilding her life and rental business. Her story spread across TikTok, Instagram, Reddit, Airbnb host groups, landlord forums, and real estate podcasts. It became a cautionary tale. Airbnb hosts learned to check local housing laws. Landlords realized how fast a guest can become a tenant. Cities examined their loopholes. This one case ignited a national conversation about what some people call tenant overprotection and others call tenant safety laws. The truth? This story sits directly in the gray zone where those arguments collide. This wasn't just a quirky Airbnb story. It exposed deeper issues. Housing instability, rising rent, legal loopholes, exploitation, the gig economy, host versus tenant rights, and the blurry line between visitor and resident. The case forced the public to confront an uncomfortable reality. You can own something and still not control it. The homeowner eventually restored her life, her business, and her peace of mind. As for the squatter, no one knows where she went. No follow-up arrests, no public interviews, no new address found. She simply moved on, leaving behind a trail of legal confusion and a national discussion that still echoes today. So what did this nearly year-long saga teach us? That the modern housing landscape is far more fragile than most people realize. That technology can blur lines faster than laws can keep up. That a simple Airbnb booking can turn into a nearly year-long property battle. And above all, that rights, laws, and loopholes can sometimes collide in ways none of us see coming, until it's too late. This case wasn't just about squatting. It was about control, law, ownership, and the very definition of home. At the end of the day, this story leaves us wondering, how many more homeowners could find themselves in this situation? What happens when tenant safety laws collide with property owner rights? And is the legal system prepared for the new era of digital renting? It's a case that forces everyone, renters, homeowners, policymakers, and platforms, to face some uncomfortable truths. Questions to think about before operating an Airbnb. 1. Do you think Airbnb hosts should undergo mandatory training on local housing laws before being allowed to list properties? 2. Should tenants be able to claim full residency rights from a short-term rental booking? Or should there be a separate legal category for temporary digital guests? 3. If a squatter causes property damage, should the city or platform have responsibility to compensate the owner? Why or why not? Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more topics like these. See you next time.